Retailer's Roadmap Cruise Control, where we navigate the roadways of life, business, and everything in between. Hey guys, it's Kevin Davis from the Cruise Control Podcast. This is episode number 23. I am here with Michael Honn of STEK Films, and I'm really excited to have a conversation with him. This is kind of going to be my own edification. Hope you guys will listen along as I educate myself more about film. I'm pretty excited to have him here. So, hey, Michael, welcome. Thanks for coming on board.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, Kevin.
Hey, why don't you give me, one of the things I always ask about is just this kind of detailing superhero backstory, but kind of give me your backstory on the industry stuff and how you got involved, what your growth has looked like with STEK and how that process has gone for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to be honest, I feel like I'm still a pretty young guy in the industry, so my story is really just getting started potentially. But grew up not in necessarily an automotive family, but always just progressed towards cars and automotive motors and gears myself. And as a result, I always had to work my own jobs to get the car or project that I wanted as well. And so I was going to college in between summer semesters where I was like, you know what? I like these cars. How can I be around them a little bit more? I need a summer job. And so I was able to find a job just prepping, washing vehicles for Metropolitan Detail, which is a local, very, very high-end detail shop out of the greater Seattle area. And it was really in that summer break between semesters that I didn't know the opportunities or doors I had just opened. But I really enjoyed working for these guys. I saw how hard that John and Benjamin, the owners of Metropolitan, were working and how much time they were spending to support their business too, and not necessarily with their family or with their kids, which is maybe their goals. So I wrote up a little consultant report. That's what I was going to school for, was business and marketing. And I wanted to give them this consultant report before I went back to school, just to be like, please go spend some more time at home with your kids. You deserve to. And they appreciated that. So after we went over that, you're like, hey, come find us when you're out of college, see what we're up to. And they weren't sure if they're going to have anything at the detailing business, but you never knew, what might be coming up. So it was probably about a year and a half later or so that I graduated. It was a little bit early. And I had a bunch of different interviews lined up with corporations like Comcast and these other daunting, not very exciting entities. And one of those interviews was with John Benjamin, the owners of Metropolitan Detail. And they had just acquired the distribution for STEK or STEK. And I had no idea what that was or what really paint protection film was. Still brand new to the detailing industry. I felt just comfortable enough washing fancy cars and doing some light auto scrubbing type stuff. But it seemed interesting, and they didn't really have a team for it yet. It was John and Benjamin, Howard, who was going to be their general manager, and they had known from previous relationships, and I think was actually one of their customers. And then they had this older gentleman that came out of retirement to help really jumpstart their sales process and structure. But that gentleman wanted to go back out of retirement, and it was really just perfect timing. Up came me. And so it was all kind of perfect. This gentleman wanted to leave, and I needed a gig out of college. I never thought I was going to be a sales guy, but that was what the role was initially just to go evangelize for the brand. And when no one knew about it, it was really door-to-door sales. I was legitimately dressing up in a suit, getting in a rental car, preloading, 30, 50 samples and traveling through California for a couple weeks at a time and just visiting as many shops as I could, talking to them, explaining the film, what was different about it, of course, after learning all that stuff myself. But that kind of very naturally progressed. The product was good, and I learned that pretty early on, is people liked it. And so I was able to just get in people's hands, and then the rest kind of sold itself, be available when I called, do my follow-ups and such. But that very quickly progressed into just a growing customer base to where I needed to hire some more people to help me with sales. And probably waited too long for that, actually, but eventually got there a few years later, and 1,000 accounts later or whatever. The team started growing. So I built the sales team. And I wanted to get back to marketing, which is ultimately what I went to school for, where kind of creativity got to come to fruition. And as of just the start of this new year, sales team's been rock and rolling, taken over by our general manager, and I've been able to start our marketing efforts. And so really, it's exciting for me now that the brand's more established. There's more to market, and so it's really good timing for that as well. And I like just growing teams in general. So it's been fun wearing all sorts of different hats, and that might have been too long of a story, but to your point, talked to many, many people, and had a lot of different touch points throughout the growth of this company.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's nice to be able to do, to go out and get cold leads, but don't have to actually go walk around in a suit, right?
Yeah. It's we've come a long ways, and I was actually just in California driving through one of those towns. I first was on the road trip on earlier this week, and I was like, dang, we've come a long ways since I was here, fresh out of college, and no one knew about us, and was uncomfortable, talking about it and all that kind of stuff. So it's been a really, really exciting and also rewarding process just to have the growth both personally and professionally, and then as for the business as well.
That's awesome, man. I think it's rare to actually come out of college and be able to have like, this is kind of, I went to school for this. I learned this stuff. I can help apply this to your business with metropolitan detail and kind of then lead that into something else. And then, so it's still a small company, right? It's pretty,
Yeah.
you guys are a pretty small team.
Yeah, absolutely. There's less than 20 of us in the warehouse on a regular basis. And granted, our manufacturing is not done here. That team's much bigger. But as far as the U.S. sales, distribution, training, support team, it's a very tight and cozy family.
Which is awesome because then you, like you said, you got an opportunity to basically wear all these hats, be involved in operations and the warehouse and sales and door to door. And, so like, what it has taken so far to build this brand because you're building it almost from the ground up. Right. And so that's a great skill to have had. And now to be able to kind of say, all right, I don't want to do sales anymore, but I'll kind of still do sales as the director of marketing, which is, essentially basically sales, right?
Right. It's just a different scope, or you're using a little bit different words, different direction, maybe. But
yeah,
and both are fun. And what's ironic is initially I didn't think I'd ever be a sales guy, so to speak, right? And I think a lot of us find ourselves in sales, and we didn't think that we were going to land there, but we end up, having a lot of success or learning a lot. And I think that customer service interaction experience, when you're in sales, can go so far to benefit every other aspect of running a business, just from managing other people, your employees, your staff, team members, as well as just dealing with customers that you have. And so it's been a pretty fun transition to challenge myself in that way and get comfortable being uncomfortable, in terms of, showing up cold calling at a door with, samples in your hand in a suit, and sometimes having that door closed in your face, and the next one, greeting you with water and, open hands or whatever. So it's kind of that dynamic that I think has been fun as we look to build our team too. Being that customer service has been such an important part of what we have going on here. And Kevin, when you had a chance to talk on our podcast, did you have any sales experience? I can't remember. Is that where you started?
I've been self-employed since 1997. Started my first business, which was actually in web development. But before that, I ran multi-million-dollar health clubs, and I was a personal trainer. So like that's all I did was sales, from the time I got out of college, I started selling. And so I have an exercise physiology degree and a business degree. So I kind of was able to combine those things. But in my mind, we're all like, even if you're not in quote unquote sales, you're always selling. And I think even as individuals, we have to sell, because unless you're like a true introvert that never leaves the house, you're selling yourself to almost everybody you meet in one way or another, right? So it's all sales.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sales almost has like a negative connotation to it. People hear the word sales. I don't want to be sold to. I don't want to, be pitched. And realistically, to your point, that's a lot of how our brain functions. Is we're constantly weighing these variable alternatives, right? Is this going to be worth it? What is the outcome, or what's the positive or negative of this? How is that going to make me feel, or how is this going to make the other person feel? And so I think it's a very natural way to communicate. And I think for like a young person, whether or not you have that formal education, we've been able to grow a team here of sales folks. Of half of us have college degrees and half of us don't, but we're all successful because we have those people skills that you can only really learn once you're out there in the real world and doing it. And I think that's been really useful. I'm curious in terms of your customer service and people and sales experience, was there anything particular that always surprised you? Or were there any tricks that you had as far as kind of approaching that?
I kind of a weird childhood and moved around a lot. Like I changed schools every year. So I learned how, and I kind of have this innate ability anyway, but I would refer to myself as a social chameleon. So I have this kind of innate ability, learned or otherwise, nature versus nurture, to be able to identify with people in a way that I can connect on some level very quickly. And so from a sales standpoint, that really, and customer service, that's something that really has come in handy for me, because I can almost all, like, it doesn't matter, I've met billionaires and A-list celebrities, and and then I'll talk to the same way. I talk to everybody the same. Like, I never had that celebrity thing. Like, I would be like, you just have a cooler, more public job than I do, and you make more money. But like, at the end of the day, they're just people doing their jobs. They're trying to work for a living and provide for the family and that kind of thing. And I think from a sales perspective, when you're selling film or detailing services or eggs or whatever, being able to identify with other people and figure out exactly how you can connect with them and how you can serve them in the way that they need, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree, and I found the same thing. And I think what's most useful for me to get there each time is sometimes I'll just blurt out and start rambling, and then you're missing all the details and all the important information, which is, what does this person needs or wants? Where are they at? And the best way that you're going to have a chance to understand where they're coming from is to listen and, just quiet yourself down a little bit and open those eyes, open those ears, and really, give them your full attention, be present, and look at what's in front of you. And then you're gonna be able to meet this person wherever they're at. And I found that part of that process the most rewarding. Not if there was a sale at the end of that conversation or not, but simply having the ability to connect off that one point, or you understand all of a sudden what this point is, and you guys are able to, jive back and forth. I think that's, as a human being, the communication that we have, I think, is one of the most kind of unique and special things about what we can do, is we can collaborate and we get to work together. And so really it's those, connections, relationships we have between, ourselves and another human being that will be most meaningful at the end of the day. So why not take those opportunities to not just push paper and sell something, but actually get to know someone and build, a genuine relationship. And that's been, really fun to get to do, and endless amounts of here, as far as many people as you want to call, there's going to be that email list. So be ambitious, get after it, and don't be afraid to get started on those phone calls. And those first few are done.
And from your side, how does that work when you're doing, because you guys are B2B. I mean, you're B2B2C, basically, is how your business is. Business to business is primarily what you do at that level. And how does that relationship building work? You talked about kind of doing, cold calling, knocking on doors, going to shops and all that. Walk us through that process just a little bit. And then before we forget, I do want to talk about kind of the history of PPF, but I'll put you on the spot a little bit there. But yeah, talk to me about kind of how that process works from a B2B standpoint, because I think that all shops and all business owners can understand that, even if because I have multiple businesses, and with Detailers Roadmap, we're B2B, we're building websites for detail shops. Some of my other brands are B2C. So it's a whole different, it's kind of a different approach. But I'm interested in knowing kind of how you've approached that as a sales guy, as a marketing guy, and how you do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Couple different funnels, to be honest. I think there's kind of the organic funnel, then, this paid funnel as well. And this industry is a lot smaller than it looks from the outside in. And so I think initially a lot of success was just through like word of mouth, in terms of that brand, just evangelism, getting that word out there. And getting a little ahead of myself, before that, no one knew about us. No one was calling to ask for our film, or no one was interested in samples, because no one knew about us. And so what we had to do to start that funnel was physically have that presence, go door to door. And by having that physical in-person presence, it established a little bit more trust. It's not just an online brand or some film that was made overseas. Now I can see a face, I can shake a hand, and feel the film, in my hands as well at the same time. And so by delivering that whole package, I think we were able to get the initial conversation started. People saw that we were taking it more seriously, and they were willing to take us more seriously as a result. And so once we got that kind of interest, initially, I guess, pursuing those leads ourselves, that funnel is very much, we'll let the film do the talking. I believe in the product that we're offering, and for multiple different reasons, it can make your life as an installer a little bit easier. It has potential to improve the customer experience for your end users as well. And so I want our shop owners, our customer base, to believe that and see that. And if you don't, I'm not going to strong arm my way all the way through your first purchase. We don't need to make that first purchase. I'm going to leave, that seed planted. I'm going to pour a little bit of water in it by just checking in every 1 to 3 months, every quarter or so. And what's ironic then is you hear in the trade shows you go to, especially the first ones, like, "Oh, you're Michael. You're that guy that keeps calling me. Oh, sorry, I never texted you back." You're like, "Oh, I kept meaning to get back to you." And you hear that a lot. But that just shows that, like, yeah, that is an important part, is being consistent and due diligent in that follow-up, because we're all busy. the first time I mention STEK or STEK, you're not going to remember that. But maybe after 3 or 6 times, it's going to start, ringing a bell, and you're going to, want to follow through. So same sort of thing for any sales, but initially is really just that follow up and follow through. And we're really pretty strong about that for at least 3 to 6 months. We want to give you a chance to tell us no a couple times, and then we'll leave you alone, essentially.
This episode is brought to you by Detailer's Roadmap. Hey, spoiler alert, that's us. We all know you need a kick-ass website in order to be successful with your business. The good news is, at Detailer's Roadmap, kick-ass websites, that's kind of what we do. With the latest performance, designs, and SEO strategies, Detailer's Roadmap is your one-stop shop to be successful on the web. And don't forget, we have the best support team in the industry. Whether you're an existing partner looking to improve your lead generation or you need a brand new website, Detailer's Roadmap is here to help you be successful on the web. So go to detailersroadmap.com/success and get started today. That's detailersroadmap.com/SUCCESS.
And then, as we grow, the brand has done such a phenomenal job of just being desirable. And so now we have tons of leads reaching out every day. And it's an extremely grateful position to be in as a marketer and as a previous sales director. Is like, no, we don't have to be as aggressive in who we're pursuing from a cold standpoint, because we have these warm leads already coming in and we can focus on those. And so generally that funnel is qualification. Do you have a business license? Do you have formal training for PPF? If you do, then we'll get you some samples, and again, let the product do the talking, get them in your hands, give you a month or so to try that out, see how it holds up. And we're going to keep checking in on you and following up. At that point, you're maybe on our email list or checking us out on social media. So you have these other touch points with our brand as well. And we're a team that's not built on commission. That's not part of our sales structure, that pay structure. And so everyone is sharing the same mentality of like, this call is no more valuable than that call for me. And it's
right.
We're here to help everyone at a very much level playing field. So if your rep's traveling for a show, well, someone else will cover that end's work. And what that's getting at is we're not going to push or force sales on you. Not call to ask, oh, do you need another role? We're going to call to ask, how's your business going? Do you need any pointers on marketing, or have you thought about your pricing? And, are there any business conversations you want to have? And if not, have a great day. Know we're here as a resource, but we don't need to force those products on you. And so generally that creates a very organic cycle where people decide to come back to us, whether that's 6 months or a year or immediately too. I've even had some folks, I've talked to 3 years ago, circle back around and be like, I remember talking to Michael early on. And so really, again, with just such a good product, planting that seed and just doing our due diligence to be here, be available, remind them that we're here if that's needed too.
Yeah, that's really cool. And to kind of create, one of my brands was the Detailer's Helper. It's a tool belt. It's a product that people didn't and still don't know that they need until they got it, right? Like so you're almost having to create your own market, which actually is probably easier than what you guys faced uphill. And I'm sure there's a balance between kind of old school, if 3M, Avery, those are the only boys in town. They didn't even call it PPF. It was just Clear Bra, right? Like walk me through that. Cause like you guys came in as this underdog, and I know that old school guys, like they're old school. Like, I've been using 3M for the last 20 years. And I'm like, yeah, but it still looks like crap, just like it did 20 years ago. But like, walk me through, not all 3M stuff is bad, but they're just a huge company, right? Like you're not going to get the kind of service that you guys are providing in that way. But kind of how did this progression happen? Because Clear Bra was back in the 80s. I mean, it's been around since the 80s, probably.
Yeah, exactly. Happy to dive in. And I think it's very appropriate you brought up 3M as an example, because these were actually the engineers behind the initial Clear Bra paint protection film. And paint protection film was introduced as a byproduct of the Vietnam War. The helicopters were landing in the jungles, and the wind turbines on the helicopters were getting damaged from just all the debris and the vines and all the crap just flying up in the air. And so it was a very, very expensive and a timely process to maintain these helicopters, replace, those blades, among safety and other things and just financial. So the government then contracted with 3M to develop this product, and they came up with this urethane plastic, and it was a lot different than exactly what we see today, but it was essentially the first PPF. It was going on the edges of these turbines and protecting the blades from debris and damage and getting more use, more life out of these, expensive military equipments. And so once the war was over, they're like, well, we have this new product technology. What can we do with it? And it wasn't actually for initial few years until it made it to NASCAR. And that was kind of the first like automotive application that we saw. And the thought process was, well, we need to protect our, sponsorship graphics and stickers on the vehicle. And the best way to do that was to apply this film. And now NASCAR is really picky, and there's certain, like minute measurements has to be within, and regulations and such.
Drag coefficient and all that crap too, probably.
yeah. So now it's a whole wormhole, if you will. But that was really the first time we saw a protective film on a car that was similar to the PPF we have now. And so that was generally the progression. The technology had a little bit more, R&D behind it. Other, companies are recognizing that this is available now as well. And for those that are unfamiliar, Clear Bra PPF is a TPU-based plastic. So it's a thermoplastic polyurethane. And that's a little bit different than your window tint or vinyl. Those are PVC or PET plastics. And essentially, they're just less elastic. This urethane is a very durable material. It's absorbing of impacts and such. So ultimately just can be more protective in nature. And really the challenge is then to get it into the automotive space is what we see the old Clear Bras, right? And you might still find some out there that are cracked. They look horrible. They might not even be yellow. They maybe even turn black at this point, if it was really one of the first ones. And so that kind of created some fear. And when they were first getting on automotive cars, the only place you could see it was dealerships. And it was probably already on there. It wasn't even an option, whether you wanted it or not. It was, you're getting this car with this on it. And so, unfortunately, in 5 to 10 years, those films were failing. And that's because of the UV damage and other testing that needed done. The technology just hadn't progressed yet. And so that brings us really to like the early 2000s, where in just these last 20 years, the progression has been absolutely exponential. And I would say arguably the last 10, 15, every like 5-year chunks are just huge progressions in the industry. And so, these other big companies start coming out. There's 3M, and they were the first, but we also see Eastman enter the space. There's a couple other brands too, where if you talk to installers, that they've been doing it for a long time. If they mention Venture Shield, you're like, oh, you're one of the first PPF guys. And so these other brands and technologies entered the space, which was great because it created competition and a need to develop the technology further. And so we found in that engineering process, and I say we, but really I'll back up just a little bit more. So STEK had actually been around during pretty much this whole time. STEK was started in 1977 as just a tapes, laminate-backed adhesive type film manufacturer, but it wasn't making paint protection film specifics up until these technologies progressed. And even then, it was just under a private label name. And it wasn't until about 2014 or so where the STEK engineers came up with a formula for what is now our Dyno Shield, our top-of-the-line Clear Bra. And they tweaked what they were doing with other films to make Dyno Shield what it is today. And they realized this is just a league above what else we were making. And so we need to put our own name on it now. And so that's really where the commercial STEK automotive brand was built, or born, I should say. And it was, more of just a private label manufacturer. And so we do supply and support from early on Toyota, Hyundai, other big OEM manufacturers. And we are one of a few manufacturers. There's a lot of private labeling that goes on in this industry, but STEK is its own manufacturing facility. We make, PPF to window tint, to safety films, to chemicals, all sorts of other manufacturing. So it's with that expertise, the birth of Dyno Shield came up, and again, mid about 2014, 2015. And that's really where the commercial brand started taking off. And so that's where they opened distributorship here in the US. And I think now we're in about 80 other countries throughout the world as well. And that engineering ability and knowledge, that kind of innovation that we had with the Dyno Shield, happy to touch on more, is also what has differentiated us as we enter the space, an already saturated market, as you were talking about a little bit.
Yeah, it's crazy. Honestly, it's kind of crazy when you talk about the chemistry of this, because like urethanes have been used in automotive paint forever. Polyurethane is what you seal your coffee table with after you sand it all the way down. So it's interesting how they can take that chemistry, and the basic chemistry remains a little bit there, but then they're adding, elasticity and different polymers and all that kind of stuff to make this, make it actually work. And then they have to do UV protections, right? And then they have to make sure that the sun, it doesn't, I'm assuming some of those early films, they kind of off-gassed whatever the flexibility components were over time, and that's kind of what made them brittle and, no UV protection built in and all that, correct?
Exactly. And honestly, like UV is just one of the most damaging or harmful things we have to deal with in the daily world. A lot of people don't realize that there's UV A, B, and C. There's this huge spectrum of UV, all of which is damaging. And to your point, yeah, it's gonna age anything that UV is on, whether that's wood that you stained on your deck, whether that's your car's clear coat, or whether that's a plastic film on your car. Regardless of the protection you have on it, there will still be wear and tear over time. That's important to understand, even for these modern films. No, we're not seeing the yellowing, of the past, and film's not just cracking and looking horrible after a few years. But if we're being honest, like it's a plastic and it's going directly under those UV rays, you will see aging over time. And so I think it's important as a manufacturer just to set those expectations, because I feel like lying if I say, no, there's no aging that ever happens. Plastic will look exactly as it did on day one. Well, no, leave your plastic bag outside for 10 years. It's going to look different than it did on day one,
right,
too. So, but to your point, I think what might be interesting for the followers to understand is this TPU plastic. Most of us are getting it from the same supplier, or there's only a couple of suppliers of this TPU in the world. So that means that every manufacturer is really responsible for formulating the adhesive and the top coat and applying these components together, or manufacturing them. But that's really where the proprietary like engineering and technology and research and development comes from. So if you're really, nerding out about it, you geek out and you dive further into the manufacturing, you might see that there's this, source for TPU, but it is into that individual, engineering of each manufacturer that makes the films better or worse.
Yeah, and if I remember right, that made it really fun for the supply chain issues that we had during COVID, right? Because it was like, I remember seeing posts about, XYZ says we're 18 weeks out from getting a box of film. And it's like, what are you going to do? There's only, like you said, if there's only a handful of manufacturers that actually make the base components, then you're kind of screwed. And that went for coating companies and blenders and all that, right? So I'm sure that made that fun.
Everything. Yeah. Honestly, we were very, very blessed, I'll say, simply because our engineers and our team overseas is brilliant. And so they were thinking ahead, and they do project as best as possible so that we have inventory to cover us regardless of whatever, circumstances happen in the world. And so generally speaking, with that buffer, we were able to keep production up on schedule, keep inventory in-house for 99% of our products. We were one of the few, I think, fortunate enough not to have huge, fluxes of availability. So,
and that's the benefit. That's a benefit of being your own man. Having an actual manufacturer, right? It's kind of like it's like blenders in the U.S. for detailing, right? Like I have a detailing brand, and I always joke, and we sell chemicals, but I always joke and say, yeah, I took a scientist to the South American rainforest and we found this frog, and that's what we made our waterless wash lubricity components out of. Like, I mean, some of the stuff that they say is just ridiculous, right? Yeah. At the end of the day, there's like 4 major blenders in this country, and all that stuff, all the juice is coming from, all the basic stuff is coming from the same place, right? So I'm sure the film world is very similar.
Yeah, it is. And, in the last just few years over the pandemic too, it was fascinating. There was decent demand. The industry is definitely growing. Awareness is there, especially in the enthusiast market for new car protection, paint protection films. But with COVID, the influx of just interests and leads and car owners just doing research. They're like, I'm at home, I have some extra money. What can I do to my car? It just seemed to be like one of the most common questions people were asking.
Yeah, so, I miss the COVID economy as a guy that sold car products on the internet.
Yeah, everyone had time.
I loved it.
Look at their cars, right?
Yeah.
But that's also changed the space a little bit. Is that there's been so many new competitors, if you will, entering the space, not only from a manufacturer standpoint, but also even from an installer standpoint. The markets that were already saturated, like Southern California, have even more folks there, and other more rural markets now have 2 or 3 shops opening up where it might have only been one within multiple stone throws. And so what that is telling us is the demand is there, the education is slowly growing from the enthusiast standpoint. And so I think now is a really, really important time for manufacturers and shop owners alike to kind of take that honest responsibility of, well, this might be the first experience that someone's having with these films and these products. And for those of us that are in the industry, we know that there's always the right way to do something and the wrong way. And if you look hard enough, you're going to find folks doing both. And so really just encouraging people to get the best experience possible. And what does that conversation need to look like? Where do they progress? Like, how do we, as a manufacturer, add more value to the car owner experience? And what is our responsibility in the industry to kind of cater that as well?
Yeah. And do you see, so obviously over the last decade, we've seen ceramic coatings just go through the roof, right? But there's also been this transition from like pro only to more DIY type stuff. Do you see, and is any of that kind of similar thing happening? I mean, obviously putting film on is not, it's not easy. I mean, I've applied tons of film to different things, but it's not necessarily something your average person can do. But do you see this industry transitioning into more of a consumer friendly type setup, or is it just always going to be pros only?
Yeah. Regarding the STEK brand, I think it'll always be pros only. And part of that is just brand image and brand protection.
Correct. Yeah, that's right.
The other reality of it is, and like I think just simply put, is like, well, first, I'm not an installer. I think that's good for any of our installer or like listeners to understand too. But for someone that's looked from the outside in, if you will, at multiple installers from decades experience to come into our training, being the first time they're seeing film, it's going to take you at least half a year to really build your confidence as like a professional level, bad freaking installer, if you will. Unfortunately, there's not just an easy like flip of the switch. I'm going to be good at this next week. It really just takes that seed time and repetition and again, consistency of practicing. And so it's hard for someone that hasn't tried it to really understand what I'm talking about in terms of that difficulty level. But you're not going to have a good experience unless you've had formal training. And watching a couple of YouTube videos might seem simple. When you go and apply it yourself, you're going to be wasting your time and your money. And in most cases, there are a few lucky few where, if you're okay with some bubbles or some lines or whatnot, you'll probably get away with it. And sure, you got some protection on your car. But 9 times out of 10, I feel like that conversation is generally going to be negative and to be that didn't look how I wanted. This material is bad or the brand's bad. And end of the day, what matters is they didn't end up with the protection that they wanted. So no one wins in that, I think, relationship.
Right. Yeah. Cause it's not, they're not going to blame themselves on their skill set, right? It's always it's the film and all that. And I guess there may be a path to where they figure out a way to make it more forgiving or something like that. But like, that's obviously a completely different product. That's a consumer product. And yeah, like you said, it's not something that you just lay your first film down unless you're doing like a 68 Cadillac has nothing but flat panels everywhere. But I have a 65 Cobra replica that I built, and I've never done film on it because there's not a straight line or a break point on this entire car. So you have to do the entire car. So like I haven't ventured down that road, at this point, but I probably should, because every time I take it out, it gets a ding in it. So, but that is what it is. But I was curious about that because I know the consumer market on coatings has changed, obviously. But I to your point, I think it's something that the level of, at the end of the day, you can get high spots with certain coatings, or you can screw up and forget to wipe it off and then have to have it wet sanded and those kind of things. But there's so many consumer coatings that literally you just wipe it on and wipe it back off. And it's not, you're not going to get the same level of protection with those things, but it's not rocket science. It doesn't require a heck of a lot of skill to drip it on the applicator, wipe it on the hood, and wipe it back off, right? Like there's not as much. It's dealing with the problems that become the hard part for installers, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, depending on what your use is for it, that maybe there will be a approachable DIY product out there. If it's like a track day, you just want something temporary, you're going to pull off after a couple day weekend or after the rally that you're on, then yeah, absolutely. I think there's some good film options that you can go on to various websites and buy some paint protection film yourself, get it on. It's not going to look great, but then you can get it off and your car was protected. And so I think that use definitely has its value. And where I was really elaborating on with like the quality earlier is most folks backing up, these films all have 10-year warranties. Most folks want to get close to that much life out of them. And so in order to have it on the vehicle looking good for that lifespan, does need to be installed really, really well, which means the edges are sealed properly, maybe wrapped around the majority of the panels. And if you're going to be looking at it for 10 years straight, you don't want those bubbles or other, install marks, if you will, to come up and be an annoyance every time you have that, aesthetic. So essentially, it's just going to be worth your time and value to pay a professional. It's just like a tattoo or something. It is an art form at this highest level, just like detailing and paint correcting is an art form. Paint protection film very much so is too. So do your homework, do your shopping, talk to as many shops as you need to be comfortable that you have an artist working in your car that's going to take care of you and your vehicle.
Yeah, because that kind of stuff can be an eyesore. And honestly, that was one of the reasons, I finished my car probably 4 or 5 years ago. And one of the reasons I never even considered is like the last thing I want is a line across both of my, front fenders, right? Like that's because there's no brake point on that car. It's a fiberglass body. There's literally no hood lines, or there's a hood line, but you can't break it naturally across the whole body. So then you get that little stripe, right? Like, so that, I guess the only way to deal with that, right, is to just wrap the whole area. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, so that's the other reality is there are limitations to films. There's some panels are too wide or the angle just can't conform because there's, multiple degrees, I guess, that you're trying to make the film bend. So realistically, we make up to a 6-foot wide roll. And these rolls are, as long as, say, 50 feet. So there's most cases you're going to be able to get that 6 by whatever length you need across the panels. But it goes back to the expertise of the installer. Are they comfortable enough? Have they handled a sheet of film that's, bigger than their arm span? And they're going to be able to walk that over to the car and get it done without screwing up things at the same time. So not an easy car. And for anyone doing their homework, you alluded to that line. That is like the partial bra bikini
right.
Coverage, if you will. And that's really becoming less popular because everyone doesn't like seeing that line. The line always comes up, after even as soon as like 6 months. It just depends how dirty it is out in the environment you're in. So to your point, to do it the right way is going to make you happier. You're going to have something that you're proud to show off to your friends. It's going to last longer and ultimately probably cost you less money in the long term.
Yeah. Because even consumers that are washing their own car or whatever, almost everything is going to leave a residue. And so as you're wiping that stuff across that seam, it's not the fault of the film or the installer. It's just a matter of you're accumulating little microscopic stuff right there on that edge, which makes it more prominent. You talked about these, new shops popping up is kind of, I think, how you put it. But are we seeing more now fully dedicated film shops, or are most of the people putting on film? And I see this transition, right? Like we transition out of just detailing into ceramic coating. And now I think we're transitioning from ceramic coating to either adding film or just converting your whole business over to film and then doing maybe an upsell on ceramic coatings. Is that kind of what we're seeing in the industry? Or we're seeing more of the, this is a brand new shop that's completely dedicated to film, or are we seeing like more multi-integrated sites?
Yeah. To be honest with you, both. I would say the majority is that natural progression of, hey, we were detailing, we were ceramic coating, and now we're ready to add paint protection film. Or maybe, hey, we're a sign and vinyl wrap shop, and we're getting a lot of requests for paint protection film, so now we're going to look at that. So there are a lot of people already in the industry that are converting to or expanding to offer this service. But I would say maybe, and this is just totally a Michael number, not anything verified, but maybe, 40% or so don't have that industry experience or they knew about films and automotive, but they don't come from a detailing background. They just wanted to open a shop. And so we had a trainee that was in this last week, I think, where it was, a father-son setup where, we got film in our cars, thought about this, wanted to change in, our lifestyle, if you will, want to be closer to the enthusiasts, and decided to open our own shop. So they came to training, and the first thing that they're focusing on is film. And largely someone smart probably told them to start with film. But the other reason with that is simply just because there is a healthy margin to be made in paint protection film and new car protection. But it's, a labor of love in terms of that learning curve. Like there's a reason that the prices are what they are. And I think they're 100% justified because of that training and that progression that it takes. It again takes an artist to really do it right. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I think that answers my question. What I do want to follow up there is and without giving away any proprietary secret information, but what do the numbers look like for your average shop, like in terms of like overhead and startup costs? Because I mean, you have to have, if you're looking at plotters and those kind of cutters, and we can talk about what a plotter is, but what does that kind of look like? And you said it's got good margins. Is it similar with some of these other services? Most obviously, and I keep going back to ceramic coating because that's like the closest high ticket item that we probably have to discuss. You pay 150, $200 for a 50 mil bottle of something, and then you bill it out for, of course there's correction and coating and all that, or correction involved too. I'm curious how those numbers compare and what those numbers kind of look like. Because if I'm thinking about, all right, I'm this your average shop out there, I'm doing tons of ceramic coatings and detailing and all this, but I've been thinking about adding film into my business. What does that all look like?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. So it varies, right? The scale of the business, and that's really the biggest variable is, do you have staff and what is that shop space?
Spoken like a true marketer's. It all depends.
Right.
Just kidding.
But no, so generally I think the swing is most commonly between 20 and 40%. And that isn't going to include your film costs, probably just being the most black and white. And I think also for this industry, I'd like to bring up, there's a lot of country boy math out there that happens. And to me, what that means is we're shooting from the hip, looking at the cost of the film, looking at the retail price of the job, and then everything else in between is money we made. And in which case, we're all rich, right? We're all doing really, really, really well. And so
I have 110% margins. That's
phenomenal. Everyone would be in business. So the reality is like, nope, there's tons of other costs and expenses that come up. And I think outside of the labor and the film, those are the two very, very simple ones, your rent, your overhead. The biggest other should kind of be like a quality expense, I feel like, where you should have some extra margin for when we're dismantling. If we break a clip, we're going to replace that clip with an OEM clip. Vice versa. If anything does happen to the vehicle or the body panel, we have the insurance to cover that. Or the peace of mind ultimately to deliver the complete product to our customer. I think most commonly, like where it's really important to understand why margins are needed is you're going to screw up. You're going to have to redo a panel at some point. And if you're removing this, piece of film in your hood and that's costing you hundreds of dollars just in material, well, that's a really expensive mistake you just made. It maybe took you an hour or two to install it, and now you're costing material. And so you're going backhill very, very fast. And that seems like it's snowballing. But if you charge the right price to begin with, then you have that margin to be like, I'm going to pull this film. I'm going to do it in a good peace of mind because I know I have the margin. I'm still going to make money on this job. I can continue. So I think margin-wise, it's not that much different than coding once you can incorporate all your overhead and just the fixed cost. But the reality is that the ticket's bigger. Your $1,000 to $1,200, maybe $2,000 coding job is now a $8,000 to $10,000 full body PPF job. And so those percentages, again, fairly comparable or comparable. But I think just the overall ticket elevates your potential. And so that's where the life-changing aspect of PPF comes in, is because you can do, 3 coatings a day. But if you did 3 full fronts, you're, at week 3 of your month on day 1, essentially.
And are they looking at like a couple $100 per hour? Is that their shop rate? Is that kind of where that number gets into? Because I mean, obviously it's a labor intensive thing. Some cars are easier than others, but.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to be fair, I don't know for a fact, like what is the average labor rate. I think I've seen as low as 120, as high as 220, but really between like 150, 200 seems to kind of be the sweet spot, 175. And that's variable, as a shop owner versus one of your staff versus, long-term salaried employee versus hourly. And so all these things will change what that cost is on that job. And sometimes with PPF, there's a lot of commission structure and the installer side of things too. So the shop owners is paying their installers via commission. So, what that is exactly for your business is going to be impossible to say, but break it down into, your lights, your actual shop space, your spray bottles and the solution that's going in there, the tools. What you should do is, like, over the course of a month, take that average, divide it by the number of jobs or the number of days, and then you have your per job or your per day average cost, and then you can scale that. But regardless, without country boy math, I don't think you're getting the, quite as excited, but it is still a very, very healthy margin.
This episode is brought to you by Detailer's Roadmap. Hey, spoiler alert, that's us. We all know you need a kick-ass website in order to be successful with your business. The good news is at Detailer's Roadmap, kick-ass websites, that's kind of what we do. With the latest performance, designs, and SEO strategies, Detailer's Roadmap is your one-stop shop to be successful on the web. And don't forget, we have the best support team in the industry. Whether you're an existing partner looking to improve your lead generation or you need a brand new website, Detailer's Roadmap is here to help you be successful on the web. So go to detailersroadmap.com/success and get started today. That's detailersroadmap.com/SUCCESS. Yeah, I mean, I did this video probably 7 or 8 years ago. It was if you don't know your numbers, you don't know jack. And unfortunately, the same concepts are still 100% true, which is very few shops know they'll pick up a bottle of whatever chemical. They have no idea what that costs, to fill that bottle. No idea how much the bottle costs. No idea how much it takes to clean whatever it is. And I'm sure film's the same way because you need to factor in what happens if I have to pull a piece off and throw it in the trash? Like that's a true hard cost that I need to make sure and, like, to your point, build that in. But that, anything 125, 150, 175 is a good margin in my mind or a good hourly rate to bill out, because then you should still be making pretty good amount of money, in order to do that. So, and as far as I'm always curious, because in Latin America, we always have this argument about taking seats out when you detail, right? Like I've never taken a seat out because I think it's a terrible idea. But in Latin America, they do it with every car. Like they strip the freaking carpet and headliner out of these things. They look like they've just been stolen and they're getting ready to, sell them for parts. I'm curious, as you're taking the reason I don't, by the way, side note, is that a lot of modern cars have torque to yield bolts. And once you pull the seat out, you can't reuse those bolts. And if you don't know what torque is, you definitely should not be taking those seats out. So kind of to my point, like what kind of training do these guys and girls get on how to take the panels apart? Because I've built multiple hot rods and trying to get tolerances. And granted, a modern OEM car, the tolerances on doors and gaps and all that aren't quite what I would have done with hot rods. But how do you guys train them to know how to take these things off? Whether there may be torque settings if they're taking body panels apart or whatever. How do you guys do that?
Yeah, absolutely. To answer simply, we don't. To be fair, so I think there's a lot of men and women out there that are coming from like the body industry and more just like collision centers and even a mechanic. And a lot of shops are bringing these dismantlers on as a full-time or part-time contracted or even employed position. And that is really, really smart, I think, to do for a couple of reasons. One, this person, like, it just goes to know your strengths, focus on that, and that's where you'll be the most successful. So these people have that knowledge, that is their strength, and that's what they'll be successful at. So let them do it, and they're going to have the best results, simply put. And further, it's not easy to train guys how to work on Lamborghinis or how to disassemble, your Ferrari. Even your Tesla, comes with some tips and tricks. You always see on the forums that, how do you remove this panel or pop out this light, right? So,
well, the nice thing about a Tesla is when you put it back together, it probably has better gaps than when you took it apart.
Right. You can do it. We've seen that too. So yeah, I don't think that there is one black and white answer. A lot of that aspect of it, if you're comfortable doing it, it's because you've had experience, you've been around it, or you have a technician that you bring in that specializes.
And if you're doing if you're doing a fender, do you recommend that they take that apart, or are they tucking it? They're cutting it longer, and then they basically have skills and tools to tuck it between those two panels?
My personal opinion is a combination of tucked edges and untucked is the best way to go. And that also means that sometimes you're using a plotter cut kit and sometimes you're hand cutting on the same car. Just depending on what that panel is. Like hoods, very most common, I would say. Very often you're just hand cutting. There's no need to go with the plotter and cut that out. Whereas the fender, that is a pretty commonly plotted panel. And there's usually some lights or some vents or another, something going on that panel that makes it not just smooth. And so for that reason, you're going to either get right to that edge or wrap around. And it really just depends, what did that client pay for or ask for. If they're paying top dollar, if the shop is doing the highest quality possible, absolutely, they're going to dismantle as much as possible and wrap every edge. But when our shop owners and their sales team are selling these jobs, they're explaining what is that level of coverage that you want, because we have a price for the unwrapped edge up to that seam, and then we have one where we're dismantling and wrapping. And realistically, you get what you pay for, so you should pay more if you want that actual work.
Yeah, and we should mention, to your point, insurance, right? Like, first of all, liability waiver better be built into your friggin' sales process and your contract. And also, make sure that you have insurance. We had the discussion the other day about airplane detailing, and they were like, all these guys were posting on there, and it's like, it's not that big a deal. I'm like, dude, if you coat something wrong on a car, it's an eyesore. If you coat something you're not supposed to on a plane, you kill people. Like, you need to make sure you know what you're doing, and especially having the insurance coverage, right? So I'm sure that's a big component. Is the warranty transferable? And a lot of these questions are from my own edification, so I'm glad people are listening along. But I'm learning as we go too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you asked that. Yes, the paint protection film warranty is transferable. There's no fine print that says original only, owner only. For our window tint, because that is a lifetime or limited lifetime warranty, that is non-transferable. And that might change in the space, but honestly, we haven't had any claims like we talked about previously. Just quality control is really good, and so claims are thankfully not a huge focus of our day-to-day operation here. If they come up, it's manufacturing, absolutely, but it's rare.
Well, and most people are, I think people are keeping their cars longer now, right? But I mean, still, I drive the friggin' wheels off my cars, but most people probably 5 or 6 years, and they're trading. So you'll probably have 2 owners on each if you're, within that warranty. So I was curious whether or not that transfers. And, like you said, you make a good quality product, so you're not dealing with a lot of claims. And I'm sure that, a lot of times it's an install issue. It's not a film issue anyway. And, then you end up with that kind of thing. But talk me through. So I want to talk a little bit more about STEK, but then I also want to talk just a little bit of marketing before we finish up. What are the products that you guys are offering now? I know you have, and we're not talking about vinyl wrap. Like, that's a whole different animal. You guys don't really delve into that, or you don't really do any of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, not at all. We don't have any vinyl films. I guess you'd just leave it at that. So absolutely. We, as a automotive manufacturer, we're making protective automotive films. And so our bread and butter is Dyno Shield and Dyno Matte. Those are our 10-year top of the line paint protection films, and Dyno Shield is a gloss finish, and Dyno Matte is our matte satin finish. Those are vast majority of what our installers are using, and majority of cars getting STEK installed, it's either of those products, just clear films. And really, that's because most people like the look of their car when they bought it. That's why they chose the color that they did, and they just want to protect that so that when they go to trade it in or resell that in 3, 7, 10 years, that resale value is still there. That OEM factory showroom floor finish is as good as it was on day one. Now, where STEK's really differentiate ourselves in the space is our line of cosmetic fashion films. These are true paint protection films, meaning they're the same TPU, that thermoplastic polyurethane plastic, that provide durable protection, 10-year warranty, top coat against UV damage, and actually hydrophobics. But they have colors and different pattern options as well. And that's where STEK's quality can really be seen, is in the colors we're actually using automotive grade paints. And so it's not like a vinyl that was just laminated with some PPF over the top. Absolutely not. It is actually, automotive grade dye that we're getting from the auto manufacturers, the same way that they would be using to paint their vehicles, that we're then introducing that into our films. So, for instance, our Miami Blue is very, very close to a factory Miami Blue offered by a major, car manufacturer. We have a gray that is also very close. We have a Midnight Purple. And these colors are really, really rich in tone. I was around a car just a few weeks ago where purple was installed, I think probably 3 years ago. They removed the hood and just had to replace that because of some damage. And there was no color fade whatsoever. It matched identically to the film they had bought a few years ago, to the new sheet that he just picked up. And you couldn't tell old from new. And so that, to me, really speaks volumes as far as like, dang, these are the future of color change, even painting if you want, because it's protecting, it's more durable than your paint would be. So that whole line of fashion films, from the patterns to the colors that we offer, are getting a lot of attention on our brand. And as far as customizing your car aftermarket, if you want to change the aesthetic, this is going to be a much higher quality option than vinyl for multiple reasons. Largely the just aesthetic, but also the protection, the durability. So
yeah, my wife has a off-road Jeep that she does different kinds of rallies than what you do. Yeah, it's more navigation rallies, but we have a full wrap on it, vinyl, because it's supposed to look like it's been going through the mud. So we had a car designer actually design this Jeep, but it's been on there since 2017. And oh man, that vinyl it's, we live in Montana, and even though this thing sits inside a lot, it's still faded like crazy. And, it's tough. I actually told her, I'm like, if we wanted to tape this off, and there's literally thousands of little circles and stuff like that. So I'm like, we could just paint this thing and only take us like 2 years. But, so that's an option. But that fashion film sounds really interesting. And the price point's basically very similar in doing that.
It is comparable. So clear film, is at a much higher price point than like vinyl, as far as just like square foot coverage wise. Per square foot, you're paying more. And with fashion films, it's that even the next leg up. So these films, from a material standpoint, are more expensive, and then from an installation standpoint, they're more challenging. You have to go slower. You can't see through the films where you're lining up on the panel, where's the moisture under the panel or under the film. And so, for multiple reasons, the installers have to go slower. They're generally dismantling more than they would with Clear 2 because they want to give it that paint-like finish. And so you end up seeing on like a full color change, say for like something like a Tesla, where the panels are pretty flat and simple, maybe around 8,000 as much as 12,000. And again, that just depends what color. Was it one of our limited editions or one that is regularly produced? And then if it was something as complex as say like a Lamborghini, SVJ or something like that, well, that's like 15 to 20,000 all day long because you're going to be dismantling SVJ, and there's liability to do that. And then the number of really hard 90-degree corners that you're going to have to put little strips of film on just to make it as seamless as possible. So again, it's almost new territory as far as what is the standard there because these are such new films. But you're going to pay for what you get. And those guys that really take the time to have a conversation with you, walk you through what level of coverage are you expecting out of this? If we're taking your white car, turning it red, what are you hoping to see when we're done? And then making sure that they can, deliver on that for you is really important. And real quick to touch on training, we do require training for any of our authorized installers, either from us or another major brand, but we don't yet have color change specific training for PPF. Our trainer Robert is here as a resource. Our network, there's a few shops that are really just kind of paving the way, but it's again such a new thing that it's pretty intimidating for a lot of the network so far. And as we grow, we'll continue to grow, our education and training ability for those type of materials.
Yeah, I would guess that the nice thing about fashion film is that in a lot of cases, if you do a color change, you still need protection. If you're doing a color change with vinyl, you still need to protect it. And so like you get a 2-for-1. So even if you're paying, I don't know if that's a value proposition that you guys are using or not, but that seems to be something to where it actually reduces the cost of doing a color change if you are doing PPF on top of vinyl or, however you're protecting the vinyl itself.
Two birds, one stone. And that's also with the infused hydrophobic coating. All of our dyno series, so the clear film and all these fashion films have a hydrophobic component infused. So if really you want your ceramic coating just to make it easier to wash, well, two birds, one stone. Again, you're going to get the easiness to wash, the protection, and maybe the aesthetic change.
That's awesome. I mean, I've looked at your stuff. It's pretty impressive. I do want to talk a little about we recorded with Michael, Chris DiGiovanni, and I recorded with Michael a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about marketing predominantly and business, and so I want to kind of circle back to some of that. I actually talked to Chris this morning, and I'm like, "Hey, I'm interviewing Michael today," and he's like, "Hey," and he ran this number. He's like, "I think we have over 50 STEK installers that we've built these one pagers for, which is basically like this is what STEK PPF looks like, and this is fashion film, and this is all of those things." So from Detailer's Roadmap standpoint, like that's the web integration you talked about. And that's something, again, if you're listening to this and you're checking out why Michael's talking on this podcast and you're a STEK installer or you're thinking about it, that's a component you can add to your website when you build it with Detailer's Roadmap. But you talked about funnels. You talked about kind of this marketing language. Can you just speak, because we're on the Detailer's Roadmap podcast, right? Cruise Control. Talk to me, like from your marketing perspective, the basics of small business building a sales funnel, like social media, web, GMB, those kind of things. So just kind of give me that 101.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Absolutely. Everyone's, entitled to their own opinions here. And I think that's the great thing about marketing. And I like to start with that is there's not one right way to do it. We've landed where we're at doing how we're doing it because we tried things other ways and they didn't work as well. So
Yeah.
know that. But I think with the automotive space, it's important to understand we are in a unique industry. The automotive in general, just cars, vehicles, toys, have like a physical presence to them. And there's a very tangible aspect that is almost emotional for a lot of us car enthusiasts, where we see a vehicle, we feel a certain way. And so I like to start with that because we can use that to our advantage to market ourselves in the automotive space. And that's actually probably going to be our biggest advantage. So
yeah, because what do they say? If you don't, when you get out of your car, if you don't stop and turn around to look at the car, you bought the wrong car. Like that's that's the whole car girl thing.
Yeah. I mean, turn around every day. And so I think it builds off, well, we want them to, look at their car like that. But how do we get them to look at our business like that? And how do we get them in the business so that we can make them feel like that when they're looking at cars that we've done? And that is where the digital aspect comes in, and even the grassroots as well, is to start that conversation. I think if you're in a very big city, a lot of new technology, it's modern with the common times and trends. Absolutely, focus on your social media, and you don't actually need to be a guru or spend an arm and a leg like we were talking about. Just put content out, and then start tracking what is doing better organically than not. And consistency would be like every day post some content and keep tracking that. And then after a few weeks, well, which content did the best? Let's do some more of that. And you can start putting some money behind that stuff that did well organically, whether this is Facebook or Instagram, or even TikTok. And that's a good way to just, gradually grow. And then you can get more targeted in terms of, once I've worked with a few clients, I have an idea of what those clients are like and what I want other clients to be like in terms of their career choices, their hobbies, interests, things outside of that you can target. Maybe I have all the golfers, so I'm going to target golfing, even though I'm talking about cars, And so there's a lot of those outside the box, and that's where I think a lot of the analytics and time can be sent, and that's a lot of stuff online too. But going back to the tangibility of cars is get them in your shop. So just like when we were sending samples out to clients, we wanted to get our film in your hands, and that was going to sell you. We want to get our clients in front of the vehicles that we've wrapped so that they can see how good the matte satin finish does look on this Neptune blue or whatever. Alternatively, we want to give them peace of mind that the edges will be wrapped, that they're not even going to see that it's a film on the car, because we're that good at installing. And the only way you really can convince them of that is to show them in person. I had a couple opportunities to support, shop vehicles or talk to or shop owners that have wrapped their own vehicle. And it's their biggest sales tool. Having that, matte Model X in their lobby sells more matte PPF than they were ever able to before. And so what they have done successfully is get the phones to ring, get the inquiries off social media, and they invite them into their shop to be like, oh, come take a look. Before you drop off your car, come meet me, take a look at some of the work that we've been doing. I want to make sure you're comfortable. And almost every time, like by being patient and just planting that seed again, grows into a really nice fruition. And of not just a business relationship, but now you have more of a personal relationship because you were willing to take that time with your client. And that's really where the rest snowballs, because the next biggest thing is that word of mouth, especially before you have the reviews or online presence. You need your, customer number one telling their buddies and his or her buddies about that service as well. And this is how the whole picture kind of comes together.
Yeah, then they find your social media, they look at your reviews, they look at your website, and that's where like the education kind of comes in on website stuff and social media stuff and your videos and your content and all that. I love the idea of having I never really thought about it this much, but having one or two shop vehicles that are there and have either you have like the Heinz 57 one that shows a lot of different stuff on it, and maybe that just never leaves the shop. But like, even if you think about cost, I don't know what a lease, if you had to do a business lease or whatever, even if you're paying $1,200 a month on a car payment, let's say, which is an expensive car payment, but that, I mean, you don't have to sell very much film in order to pay for that. And just like to your point, you're going to sell film if you have a car that's wrapped that they can actually touch and see. Because again, just like ceramic coating, right? Like you're trying to take pictures of something and show your customer not in person of a clear product other than fashion film, obviously. And like, it's very difficult it's a tactile, like you said. I love how you put that.
Yeah, exactly. Almost forgot to mention like events that I know it's maybe silly for some folks. They're like, oh, I never need to go to these cars and coffees, but do it. And you're gonna be grateful that you did it when, even in the busy months, because when the slower months come, it's going to be those connections that you built out there that will start coming into the business. So again, it's exactly by getting out in front of the customer, show them what it is you're offering, help them actually feel it, touch it with their hands if they can, taste it if they want to, right? And that's the beauty of these products, is that paint protection film is even more tangible, I feel like, than a coating. If you want, you can have that loose piece and have them stretch it and, try to tear it and really get them to understand what it is you're offering. So use that to your advantage as much.
Yeah, those events are very important. And honestly, the loudest voices get heard. And sometimes, like, if you've got a shop car, think about what kind of car your customer wants to identify with, what's going to get the attention, what kind of wrap what kind of, like, if you're doing fashion film or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
like, it may not be my first choice, but a lime green Tesla in matte finish or whatever is going to get a heck of a lot more attention than a white matte Tesla at a Cars and Coffee, right? So, like, think about that in terms of getting attention and being able to show people, and like you said, have pieces and samples, and that's easy, right? You just cut little pieces, you can
Yeah,
have people make them.
exactly. I think it's been exciting to transition to marketing, see that there is such good growth already happening in the industry, and then for us to be able to jump in and be like, all right, well, what are we going to do? What's our part in this? And as I've been going out to shows, I think this last month I've been from New York to DC to California at all different shows in the last 4 weeks. We've had those film strips, and we're showing people. We're actually taking off the backing paper and like, try stretching it, try tearing it, really showing people what these films are. And there's just a lot more excitement when they actually get to put their hand on it, and all of a sudden they understand what we're talking about. They're not like some nebulous idea, but nope, this makes sense. I can see it on my car, or I can see myself getting it on my next car. So that's really, I want someone to be excited about whatever they're doing in their vehicle. And I think with the variety of cool films that we have and just the benefit that you're getting out of it, as that education grows, there will be more and more excitement and more folks, even your average moms and dads, going and getting film on any new car.
Well, and that opens those conversations. We've talked to a bunch of people, on the podcast and just in, my normal professional life. Is like, you have to get them in and understand what their needs are so that you can meet those needs and be able to, quote unquote, sell them the product that you have that meets those needs and takes away their pain points, right? Like, that's kind of the whole premise of sales. And the relationship obviously is what builds that and gives you that that basis. So if somebody's I've kind of kept you for a long time, but if somebody's wanting to kind of take the first steps, like they're either using a different kind of film now, what does that look like? If they're not using film at all and they want to integrate film into their business, what are those steps? How do they do that? Finding you guys specifically, how does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. Really simple. We want to make it as easy as possible. Anyone can go on to stek-usa.com, and we have a find an installer or become an installer button right there on the homepage. So if you want to find an installer, click that guy. If you're interested in working with us, click the become. And then if you have film experience, if you have a formal certification from any of the other major brands, we will want a copy of that. And then once we receive it, doors will be opened, along of course, verifying the business license. I should back up. So that's first and foremost, you have to be a licensed business. Secondly, we need that formal training. And so if you don't have training or that proof of certificate, you can either work with us or, again, any other major brand, but we will not send you samples or allow you to purchase paint protection film until that formal training's been done. Again, just out of quality control. For a window tint, we're a little bit more flexible and we're not requiring formal training. Just know that, if there's issues coming up type deal like warranty, we might suggest training at that point, and we do have a few really good recommendations. But all in all, really pretty simple. If you need the experience, we offer it in terms of that training facility. You can also work with a reputable company closer to yourself. And then if you're already using it, you just want to see what we're about, reach out, provide us that copy of the certificate, and we'll get some samples in your hands.
Yeah, that's super important. I think protecting the brand, obviously training is not a revenue column. It's a let's make sure our brand is protected, and at the at the end of the day, ultimately make sure that the customers are happy. So then the business is successful, right? Like that's what the training is designed to do. We're not, all these different companies that offer training for their products. It's not like we're all trying to make, or they're all trying to make money off the training. They want to make sure that you do it right, so that then the customer's happy and your business succeeds. And STEK's doing the same thing, right?
Exactly. And our installer success is obviously our success, but it is very much so a mutually beneficial, but also dependent relationship. We need each other to coexist. So we want to help you as holistically, organically as we can. Let you, find the best ideas and processes for your business, but know that we're here to help brainstorm and collaborate on what that is.
That's awesome. So website, one more time. What was the website?
STEK-USA.com.
Okay, perfect. All right, Michael, I appreciate it, man. Thanks for sharing your knowledge. You educated me. I hope other people enjoyed it and were educated along the way in all my rudimentary questions. But I feel much smarter about film now than I did an hour ago. So I think that's awesome.
Awesome, Kevin. Well, thank you so much for allowing us to come on. Always a pleasure talking with you, sir. So if you or any of your team, anyone listening, has any questions, feel free to reach out to me directly too. I'm excited to be in the industry and always talk more about film as much as we want.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Michael. Have a good day.
You too.
Head over to detailersroadmap.com and get your one-stop success solution today.